up here.
Exactly. And, and the easiest insight for people to have about what's really going on, also to kind of, because anytime you deal with twos, you're going to deal with duals. So I tell people to, well, I haven't got even a chance to talk to people really because I'm completely engaged in so many things. But I advise you to find four. Like there's a sequence of how numbers move. And if you understand that sequence and then you know the diametric opposition to the way the numbers move, then you can always find balance. So anytime there's a dual, there's will always be a four, just like in numbers there's two and four. So what we find, and then in four you'll find the absolute, like a truth. And the truth is that even in our, let's say our growth, we actually go up and down and left and right at the same time. That's what they call expansion. So it's just like a bubble. As the bubble begins to blow up, it doesn't just go up. So this whole idea that, oh yeah, I'm on the ascent, you're also on the descent, and you're also on the left scent or the right and the right scent, whatever that those terms are. And also what we see though is that those who singular, they make themselves singular. You can find them going up into higher states of consciousness. You can find them going down into lower states of consciousness. You can also find them going left and right. And what left and right is actually through the hierarchical structure on the earth of the fleshly life forms, meaning animals and humans, like that whole range of, from elephant to zebra to dolphin to, that's called left and right. And that gives us the whole procession of time and the creation and the metamorphosis of the species. And the beginning would be a snake and the end would be a bird, and everything in between, because those two embody all the genetics to create all the other entities that are within the soup, as you called it earlier. And these things we'll find as facts. They're higher truths. So they confer their power to the cosmos, and they cannot be altered. And for one to step in the way of them, and also step in the way of anyone who's moving with them, would be in the effect of one who steps in the way of the sun as it's going through its procession. Good luck. So that's why if you move with that kind of energy and you move with that kind of knowledge and power, then it puts you into a whole nother perspective. And that's really just about the expansion of your consciousness and assisting others with doing the same thing. But again, expansion means to blow out on all sides. So because of that, the higher that I get, the more I know about the depths. That's how my knowledge actually continues to grow, is because as I'm expanding, I'm also becoming aware of what's down there. And this is what also makes expanding a bit difficult, because just as you learn something like this higher truth about not allowing your energy to be siphoned by soders and not letting Eve angels get in the way of your power, you also learn about that there is these entities that have actually done that and accomplished that, because anything that you can say has already been manifested. And so, and they're thriving in the world today and doing that to others. And if it just happens to twinge in your heart, okay, because this is what's unique. If it twinges in your heart that that's not supposed to be, then by all means, then change it. Because anything that is in your heart is, you have to follow your heart with that kind of thing. So that's why I'm never going to be apologetic about what I've said about these entities and what I feel about them and what I believe people should do about them, because it's in my heart. And as long as I follow that, then I'll be fine. You see what I mean? Because I can't be judged. See, and we'll talk about that at the end of the conversation, and I'll write a note here, the judges, because it's about crossing this hebdomad. See, these beings that I'm going to name right now, which are people, they're spirits. These are all spirits we're talking about. Now, remember, the soul is not involved in this. The soul is everything. We can't ID it. So what happens is that the ones that are actually involved, they've been perpetrating this for quite a bit of time. And it's important for, when we learn about it, for us to take this knowledge also as serious. So there's somewhat a disclaimer here before I start explaining what I need to explain. If you play with this, it'll take you out. Like, I've seen a lot of people get taken out by this. Even right now, there are people that every time we say knowledge, they already try to serve darkness. So they're just looking for the words and the names of who they should go serve, because they're still in slavery. They're in slavery from debts from lifetimes ago when someone gave them multiple life sentences. Meaning that when you get in front of a judge and a judge gives you multiple life sentences, does that hold across realms? That was a question that was asked to me. And in that, I came across an epiphany and realization that if we believe in these controllers and these sorcerers and their power, if we believe that their power is greater than ours, then it will extend across lifetimes. There's people that have been given those life sentences that even when they die and start reincarnating, feel like they still owe someone for what they did a long time ago. And they work in that system. That's called hooks. That's why in most of the whole system with dark magic, they even use symbolically physical hooks. So that kind of thing, we have to ID that. And that's why it's 180 degrees of knowledge and then another 180 degrees to complete the circle. If you only have one half, the good side, then it leaves you ignorant, the dark side. And so that's what people need to understand. In their ignorance, they're becoming darkness because you will constantly engage in things that you don't even think have anything to do with holding others back and be directly involved. Just like when people gossip. Just like when someone comes to you and instead of helping your brother, you try to condemn your brother. You want to be greater than your brother and your sister. You want to be better than the woman, or you want to be, all those are the same ideas that come from the same root and source. So we have to realize that in ourselves, the root to all of our ideas, if they don't involve us connecting and coming together and building energy and connecting with everything that we really are and ever can be, because that's the only way we'll find happiness. So I'm not trying to run from here like I'm going to go somewhere and find happiness. Happiness is here now. And I have to obtain it, and I'm attaining it through this way of allowing others to break through the mess. So here's the story. Realize that sorcery is the first technology, period. I can't say enough about it. If you show up 400 years in the past with some of the stuff that you're running around with right now, they're going to worship you as God, and we'll read about you 400 years later because you're doing things like little people inside of pictures, little pictures inside of the thing, like, and there's people moving around in there. Is this some kind of magic? Even the mirror was the first symbol of magic for the ancients because it was amazing. I mean, geez, there's a reflection of something that's right there. Is that another world? Is that two places? And, you know, and even deeper than that, there's so much that we're forgetting, that the power of light, which Prometheus, the power of fire, these are all metaphors for, first of all, just like I was saying about memories, if you don't know how to control fire, you're going to get snuffed out by the darkness. The darkness is like, if you've ever been in a cave before, the darkness is penetrating. It's like you can have your eyes open. It just feels like it's going through your eyes and going through your being and everything. Darkness is a whole nother kind of energy. So what happens is in the light, you can start to identify the uniqueness within yourself. So you need these darkness in this light in order to become something. That's what it's saying. That's how things are created. So just still remember, though, bringing the fire is also gave us the power to push back things that would have destroyed us before we even got out of the seed pod. Meaning that even you could see the ancestors with the torches telling the woolly mammoth, look, we got to set up things here. So you have to understand that we all have ancestors. Those are the Neanderthals. So if we're taking the negative side or the distorted masculine and the distorted feminine of the ignorance of the seed level of our ancestors, and we're just placing that in our forefront and acting like that's all that they're about, then it's like disrespecting your family members and just agreeing because they did one thing wrong or what you perceive as wrong because you're judging them, then somehow you don't want to talk to them anymore. It's all the same thing. And when we create those, don't be upset and don't blame anyone when you find yourself cut off, because no one can cut you off but you. You flip the switch. So I want everyone to know that before I explain what I'm about to explain, for you feel like that these archons and all the rest of the names that you can give for them are so heavy that they're weighing you down. Because when you stop thinking that you're in debt to them and that you got to serve them, people are so in the brainwash service program. I get emails from people that have been reading knowledge for 4 or 5 years that we've been producing, still trying to associate with some name or something that they can say has power and that is now them.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole thing, is like it's just trying to take over your consciousness and take your power anyway. And the smarter you get, the smarter it gets because you're expanding, right? And so this also shows us that whatever it is, it will always live within us. It's about whether we can contain it, whether it actually is put in its proper place, whether it's being, you know how you see someone that has all these powers and abilities. This is Hermes' motif. It's the same as Loki's. All this power, all this intelligence, all this ability, but doing dumb stuff. That's why you notice in Hollywood, the jokers suffer the worst. The comedians suffer the worst. Even there's a sect of the Masonry that's the court of the jesters. They suffered the worst. Even with the king, who's next to him, the jester. Even in the card, the Joker is the card that trumps all of the cards, but something's wrong with the Joker. You can look at that and tell. Look what happened to Heath Ledger. So these are real things. Anytime you can map it in the reality to be occurring, you can find the correspondence to it through the occult. Sorcerers are jokers, they're jesters. So what happened? They first started doing fake tricks to try to get people to believe that they had power. And this comes from people's incessant greed in wanting favoritism, long life, and prosperity when that's already promised to you. You don't have to engage that. That's your allotment. You don't need to confirm something that you already have, right? But notice how all the cultures are rife with trinkets in all sorts of little bags and plants and all these different things that are supposed to give you long life, prosperity, etc., but not ingested, but just some carved out symbol. This is the corruption of the mind as it begins to lean on other things. So now all of a sudden, a twig or a branch becomes more powerful than a rainbow bridge. Where does that happen? Not to mention, if we start to believe that this little tree, this little branch, this little symbol has so much power, if somehow we're without it one day, oh my goodness, that means we're doomed, right? Just like that's how they played out their lost word scenario. They had the word to create everything and then they lost it. How stupid. You would think you would have kept that as if anything else, right? So just notice the game that's being played. So all these different trinkets and things left man wide open for the sorcerers. Sorcerers come using science. These are even these words today you can find in the organization, the Code of Zion. Even right now, like I have bought this device called the SIO, which is a handheld molecular scanner, and they just came under a class action lawsuit because of using that word. And then they brought up that word, and this is an Israeli company, is used within so many other corporations. They were wondering why they're being sued for it. But SIO and Sion is actually the root to the word of 2012 and the period in which that we will go through the emulation and the creation of a new world. Now we have to ask that ourselves then, are we going to be immersed into this new world, body of Christ, masculine, homogenous, whatever they got going on? Or are we going to finally go into the level that we're supposed to be with a world that is completely combined, where everyone gets to experience and express their uniqueness? So here it is. Sorcerers look for individuals like kings or people of divine lineage to try to tuck themselves under, show a few tricks to, and then get that king corrupted into the idea that through the use of this kind of power, which could even be explosives and fireworks, that they can control everything. This is the Jafar in the Aladdin, for Disney speak. Okay, yeah. So these sorcerers were all over the place, and a few of them are Apollonius of Tyana, which was a member of the cult of Apollo. So there was more Apolloniuses. This was Pythagoras, which of course is the headmaster of the Pythagorean Lodge, which encompassed Plato, Socrates, and all the rest of the guys of those days. There was Simon Magus, or Bar Magus, the magician, who even attempted to buy Abraxas or Oannes' power from him. And you see him coming through the Bible. See, only when you know this stuff, only when you live this, can you ever realize what's going on. And then, or if you're guided. So anyone who actually hears a conversation, you get the knowledge. That's called those of the guided. That means they don't have to go and dig all night or run through some church and, had something come out of the wall and all that to finally know this, because will you even make it through all of that? But I'm telling you, I know this because I experienced it firsthand. And people who have met me to know what I've been involved with in attends to what I've went through, they say they've never seen anyone come out from that like this, with a family, with kids, with trying to help people. But I came out because that's in my core. I don't like favoritism. I don't like when one person sets themselves up over another, and I always go and root for the underdog. That's just who I am. And so when I came into spirituality, I'm a savant. Everything that I study and I learned throughout my life, I mastered. So when spirituality got in front of me, I found myself quite up for the task, but quite overwhelmed about how many different integers were contained in spirituality. I mean, stuff was going everywhere. Not to mention, I had a spiritual past, so I had a lot of residue and other stuff to deal with, stuff that's trying to get me to judge things one way. So again, nobody makes it out generally. So I'm only rendering the formula, because people need to understand that if you can say, I'll give you a simple example. if you can say that, let's say, for instance, martial arts, and the art of martial arts primarily comes from Asia, hence jujitsu, karate, etc. If you can say that, then if a person wants to study the deepest art of martial arts, they're probably going to go to Asia. What I'm telling you is that the melanin dominant people of this planet, many of them had as custodial jobs and purposes to manage the spiritual world, just like someone would do martial arts. And the reason for that is that we all had a unique power and ability. And for us, we're not scared of all of this stuff. And I'm not saying it's specific to one color, because this is something that exists within inside of you. See, we keep looking at these outside colors, and you would be surprised when you're on the diamond, or you got the third eye open, you look at somebody, it looks like the face of the Keanu Reeves on a scanner darkly. When the face is just morphing into all these different characters, and you're like, man, and then, the ones that are paranoid, am I in front of a shapeshifter? The reality is that what exists within a person, if you're a seer, you can see all of their bloodline. And because every single thing goes back to the same source, then you can see everything. So you see what I mean? And so, but what governs what we see? Our judgments.
Yeah.
Our judgments. So that tells us, like I said, the thalamus operates on our judgments and determines what we can and cannot see by our own orders. There's no laws being broke here then. So if we agree to something and we didn't know what we agreed to, that's our bad. And I find that many people in this world have agreed to things that I know directly result in them not being able to awake. They may think they're awake. Because a person that's brainwashed and mind controlled doesn't know they're brainwashed and mind controlled, silly. That's the whole purpose of brainwash and mind control. The host is never to know. So you just have to assume, like, there's a way to operate under the assumption that you've been brainwashed and mind controlled, and then start going back over everything that you think you believe, and then setting up a blueprint or a system to be able to determine and define what it really is. And then what you're left to deal with after that is the ability to make the decision. And that's the decision. That's the difference between neophytes and adepts. Meaning a boy or a girl will sit there all day knowing that there's a decision that they need to make, and will not make that decision, even if it's to the detriment and destruction of everything around them, versus an adept will make that decision right away. And this is for people who want that in relationship or emotional speak. If there's somebody that you're with and you know that you're not supposed to be with them, then why are you still with them after 5 or 10 years? That's how that operates. It's like you get so many things. Well, maybe it'll get better, or, well, there's nobody else out there for me, or, well, I'm working on something else right now, so it's something I don't really need to confront, or, well, they did apologize, or maybe I expect too much, or they said that we actually give ourselves 1,000 different reasons within 10 seconds. That's how powerful the mind is. That if we don't make the decision to do something right away, we've already given ourselves within 10 seconds 1,000 reasons on why you do not want to do it. So what I'm about to tell you is going to now make more sense, because it explains to you exactly how the mind operates with actually believing any of this stuff. So through this idea of the trinkets, the sorcerers move themselves in. Now, science produced some rather strange phenomena. For anyone, like, imagine the king. The king is just like any kid that's got all this damn money that they never even leave out of the palace without an extreme retinue and guard and everybody watching what they do. Versus the kid that's the pauper, like Aladdin was, born in the streets, knows more about life and what to really do and how to survive than the king ever will. Am I right or am I wrong? So the truth is that the king never was really the person that had all this knowledge and wisdom. That's the truth. So what you dealt with was, when the sorcerers came on them, they were like overwhelmed. Sorcerers move with a different kind of power that the king was not familiar with. The kings were responsible for overthrowing the matriarchal system that had everything in check. That's when the masculines move in and dominate. But then they were no match for the sorcerers, because the matriarchal clans were handling the sorcerers. The priestesses were handling these sorcerers with no problem. See, I'm just giving you a little foreground of what went on in history. So that's how you saw large groups of people, leaders, countries, be overthrown step by step by step, as it is being done today. So in the midst of it, though, was just that idea that I could become the conqueror of the world. And someone feeding that idea to you. So you had it move from the Chaldean magic first. Okay? Chaldean magic is the strongest form of magic. It's Sumerian. Samaria is Chaldea. This is the birth and the root of the cult of the worship of a male, Tammuz and Damuzi. So then it moves from there into the Yazidis. I'm somewhat giving a chronological order. This is the Iranians that found the books and found the doctrines of practicing the magic from the Sumerians, which actually starts digging into necromancy. That the only way to actually bring a male back into the world without sending him through the womb is you have to raise him from the dead. Hello, that's Christianity. He raises from the dead. He's not even born of a woman. She's a virgin. See, we have to understand, what are these people playing around with? I feel like I'm in a world where I'm somewhat one of the only people that know what the hell is going on just by critical thinking. If anyone believes this kind of story, and you got millions of people believing this kind of story, and we reverse engineer it, what are these people thinking? What are they really like under that skin? So what we find is that this dominant male undead God as king becomes the actual religion that everyone starts to gravitate towards through this idea that man needs to be everyone's God. This goes out in the Bible as Saul, which means salt, which is Saturn, which is the cube, gets elected as king over the Israelites. But before, they were constantly being told that, hey, you guys don't need a king. You don't need a king. And so this plays out. So remember, all this stuff about the 12 tribes of Israel, this is all zodiacal codes for MEs that are embedded into humans' minds. 12 tribes is obviously 12 signs of the zodiac. The 12 signs of the zodiac are the archons because they're the animalistic forces used to create a person's urges. Those urges act out in zoomorphication and can be written in writing called hieroglyphics. In the event that you write the words in the proper order in the sequence, you've put out the alchemical formula in order to create life. Done. Okay? And life comes from fragments of the soul, which can't be identified. And it can't be identified, and we should be glad, because if we could identify it, we would become disenchanted with it. Thus, there would be no way out. So, because we still realize we have a soul and we want to really deal with that now, we're now ready to conquer these sorcerers. So, just a little backstory of what they've done. So, through the crazy Arab known as Abdul Al-Hazred, he brings the Necronomicon, which was the book chained down to the floor in the vault of the bottom of the pyramid. He brings the Necronomicon to what we would know today as the Osirian cult, which are the Hyksos kings, greedy and ready to do whatever. They've just overthrown Egypt, which was Kemet then. And now their Necro army, which is something like what you would see in the movie Pitch Black with Vin Diesel, starts to move throughout the world as the Osirian cult, replacing all matriarchal traditions with patriarchal traditions. You get Muhammad, you get Christ, you get Buddha, you get all these males, but before, all these were priestesses. The temples were only for pleasure and abundance. Tell you the truth, those are the kind of worlds I'm living in. If you guys like this, y'all can hang here. I'm going back to that then, at least. Because I'd much rather deal with abundance and pleasure than scarcity, greed, hatred, jealousy, etc., which is the embodiment of the idea of this particular being, which you can read enough of in the Old Testament. If you just see how it really is, to chop off the heads of the firstborn and to kill other species and tribes just because they're not like you, you got a real issue. It's best if you're God to just get off the planet and go and build your own shit. Think about it. None of this shit makes sense. Excuse my language. If I'm the God and I created worlds and beings that I don't like, I'm a dip. Go create me another world, let them hang out there, and I'm done. So why is it so hard for a God, if they have all this power, to just go and do something else? Why do they have to mess around with people who don't even have the power to overcome them?
Yeah.
Because that's what's clearly written, that these people don't even have power to overcome this thing. It's coming with like a nuclear bomb that people are carrying with two death angels on top of it. I mean, what are we dealing with here? You see, but this is our history, but this is why when we're cut off, we don't know it. When we turn back on, which people call activated, then all this stuff starts coming in like a floodgate. And you start trying to figure out how you're going to interpret even what I just said from when you're seeing that visually into something called English, which is like, already doomed you before you gotten started. So we see that we swam a long way. Instead of just having that 26 characters, we found this other 26. That gave us 52. That's the deck of the tarot. That's Egyptian, also known as a gypsy. See, gypsies use tarot. Tarot, the one that the English system is on, is 52 cards. 52 cards come out 52 weeks a year. This is a solar year for a solar god. This is not a lunar year for a lunar, abundant, pleasureful place that's running on magnet. This is the stress and the strife and the hissing and spitting and the serpent-like poison of electricity. You see what I mean? Powered by oil, which is blood money and blood energy, right? Like, think about this. This is this plastic and stuff. This is like blood diamonds all around us, because they got this stuff from destroying and pillaging not only our planet, but also the people who were standing on the ground, that felt that they were standing on the ground, that they felt that they were so cursed by being on. This is the tribe of Ham. They felt that because they were given the deserts, that they were cursed when the allotments of the land went out. But then when they found that the oil was in the ground, they exacted retribution upon their brothers and sisters for leaving them in the land of the desert, which is where you find the genies and the jinn, right? So through that same Chaldean genie jinn magic, we're sitting here trying to figure out how we're going to get out of this bottle, right? Because now they started working the necromancy, and you know that because OTO and the Golden Dawn is rife with it. But even before then, the Osirian cults had passed it on to the Hyksos kings, and the Hyksos kings started spreading through the world in the symbol known as Abraxas, 365, which gives us 365 days of the year, and 5 gods that sit on the point of the pentagram in order to torture every single spirit that ever gets binded in a pentagram 5-base body. Then the knowledge continues from there and is passed on to whoever it is that's going to be the next accursed people. Because to get this, that's why they call, they're the chosen people, meaning you've been chosen for the burden. See, when those people that we're seeing right now in Israel picked up that damn box and carried it out of Egypt, they now know they should have left it there. This thing does not play, and it's tearing them up. The thing is that the Merovingians, which they became later, that's who you see on the Matrix, the French, because they attacked the knowledge from the Moroccans, which were actually taking the knowledge of the Arab Muhammad. Now, if we, for the Muslim people, if you want to feel a little bit better, I'm not talking about the Muhammad that everyone's praying to now, okay? Or maybe I am. Because how many times can you go into Israel, or excuse me, even in Israel, Palestine, Pakistan, anywhere over there and ask for Muhammad, and not have to at least go through at least 3,000 or 4,000 people? You cannot go over there and ask for Muhammad and expect that that's one person's name. But it looks like that the cult of Baphomet is the cult of Muhammad. And what it contains is all the knowledge that Abdul al-Hazred had, the real Necronomicon, and what they were doing in that cube or that box, which is basically a portal from the 4th dimension back into the 3rd dimension. And it runs itself because, see, people don't understand. It all connects on the back end. None of this stuff is hocus pocus. To run a portal, it needs a power supply. The power supply must circumambulate like a generator. So all those people marching around the Kaaba become the power for the portal so that they can keep coming in and out of the world from death to rebirth, again, as if they're being baptized in the 4th dimension and then rising back out of the mouth of it, which is coming out of the snake, as they call it. So Abraxas, which is the chicken head god, 365, aka Jesus. It is the most powerful symbol in Budun, and it is used still, Jesus' name, right now, because it is known by anyone who practices spirituality that Jesus is the strongest demon in hell. So every time a person prays for nefarious and materialistic things, they generally evoke demons because they're the only ones that get into that kind of stuff. Yet they don't know. If you want a car so you can be in debt to Knights Templar and their temple, which is their bank, that's why it shows you when Yeshua came through, they had made the temple their bank. Think about what's being said. When the Messiahs, which is anyone who comes in, is like, hey, I don't think we're supposed to be doing this, comes in, the temple, which is the place of worship, actually was synonymous with the bank and where money was traded. What's being given right then is the hint that the Knights Templar were the ones that were actually conducting and funding the cult of Jesus and funding all of the cults since day one coming out of Chaldea. Right? They're getting the knowledge here on OpThink today. As we keep going with this, we find that the Merovingians then decide that they're going to disperse this knowledge under the term of Hermeticism and Gnosticism, which is actually Ophilatria. It's the worship of the snake, more specifically one snake known as Set. So as they get it, it continues to ravage them. Now they got these ideas of that they're going to actually, and all the time, remember, all the time they're pillaging the divine feminine. They're taking the knowledge and they're turning it upside down. Every single thing that they're grabbing from the truth, they're turning it around into their falsehood. Hermeticism is born, Gnosticism is born, and then all the different practices of Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and Ophilatria are rife throughout the land. This despoils the people. And then at a certain point, the knowledge makes it in, because as it's spreading through the world like a plague. See, this is what you're looking at. It's the what they call the Black Plague. And it's spreading through all the people, and they're becoming infected by this idea and this belief system that something is king over them. So then it passes to the Cathars. The Cathars give it to the Catholics. The Catholic, or who were the Jesuits, and they're really the same. The Catholics and the Jesuits get it. And then through that, because this being is moving on a hyperdimensional level, the Catholics never see it coming. They got entire Orthodox Christianity in their own selfishness to create a God. See, they wanted, the Catholics who were the Greeks, they wanted to make a God so bad and just to make the whole world worship their God. And they thought that idea was unique to them. See, what you're watching is how the world is toppled, because each of the groups that I just explained to you are actually on the key ley lines of the entire world. And something is coming to them at the same time, telling them that they're the ones that are going to rule everything. How are you going to tell 7 people that they're going to be the one that's the ruler? So this is what happened to the kings. All their minds was poisoned at the same time by a hyperdimensional entity, because it exists outside of time. I ID this as Osiris or Orion somehow has something to do with it. I'm not saying it's them directly, but they would know. So what happens is that this knowledge then, as the Cathars, the Catholics, now the Jesuits, they got their thing going on. They've built this sanctimonious kingdom that they've of all white. And then where any punishments or sins or anything that has to do with female that's done, one should be punished by it. There's no partying. There's no nothing. There's no pleasure. You see what I mean? So they're killing everything around them. This is written in the fable tales of when Venus pulls her energy from the earth and then everything starts dying because it won't copulate. This is because the Cathars issued a bull or decree throughout the land in order for everyone to basically be like Mormons, that there would no longer be any more sex, because they had gotten to the idea that woman was the creation of evil, and that by coming through her womb, we were putting our own selves back into the realm of a life eater. You see, and that same stigma that they created within their own mind actually wasn't a creation, but comes from what Jung explained with their hardships with being in the Caucasus Mountains and living in caves and having to deal with elements that were very disastrous for them, meaning the acts of God, as they call it now, meaning when weather turns against you as a person, when animals and beasts, which are intrepid, like you're not going to be out there with a saber-toothed tiger and a warm baby inside of a cave at night and expect for some to wake up and maybe you and the baby are dead. So you see, when you go into history and you go into the minds of the ancestors, you realize their plight. And only then can you have compassion. So you're not looking at it as, oh, that's another white person, or that's another black person, or all these Chinese, and they're taking all the jobs. And you're not looking at that anymore. You're just crying. Because the pain and the sorrow of when we're disconnected. And only when we come together can we sustain ourselves. And that's our lesson. And the university, which is the universe, has no problem with teaching us. It does not have feelings like we think it does. It has a positive and a negative and a neutral. And it operates as if it's a machine, keeping those 3 in balance. Not good, not bad, and not balanced, but all 3. That's what creates a cosmos. That's why I said, when looking into it, when staring into the eye, or using the eye of the cosmos to stare into life, you realize the level of sentience. And it's awestruck. You're awestruck. And at any point when you ask a question about this minute situation that we're dealing with on earth, you pierce it like laser. This is what the term Lazarus was, to raise one from the dead. Meaning you come back with so much power and truth and light and energy, you can raise the dead. And that's not the same as the necromancy that they're utilizing, which is ripping people through dimensions. You see? But we don't have time to talk about that. So